My name is Lesa Thurman. I am a voiceover artist and an actress. And I'm from Daytona Beach, Florida, but I've lived here in Dublin for 19 years. I became an actor when I was a child, but I was not a child actor. I was just playing around the house. I would put on my Sleeping Beauty record, and I was Sleeping Beauty, so I would dance around the house singing all the songs. Or I would use the fireplace hearth to do little shows. So I'd make my family sit there while I did shows that I made up and pretended I was superhero when I was playing with my brothers, except they always wanted me to be Sue the Invisible Girl, and so I wouldn't actually be there, and I didn't like that game. Okay, as I grew up, I was always in a choir. And then my musical director in my choir was doing the high school musical and called me and asked me to audition for the part of Maria in West Side Story. So it was a high school, three different high schools were involved in the making of this musical. So I got the part, and it was my first musical, and we worked for a month on it. It was like school, only, I guess it was like Glee, if you've ever seen Glee. So you're singing at some points, and you're acting at some points, and you're dancing at some points. And it was a wonderful summer, and the show was very well received, and I decided that that was really what I wanted to do. It was a little late deciding that I thought I could maybe make some money doing it. And so I went to college as theater and music, and then just focused on theater primarily. So, and then got married 3 months after graduation. My coach wanted me to go to Yale and get my master's, but I told him I was going to get married and have children and live happily ever after. How I got into acting, I suppose this was a bit of a segue into acting, was I was into a musical group at school, and we would sing and dance and travel around the state. Then I got into acting in college. I decided that I wanted to be a theater major. And so I have a degree in theater with a minor in speech. So my first professional job was a television commercial, which I had just moved back down to Florida, and it was for Thompson's Water Seal. And I was there with every other girl that looked like she could be remotely Italian, because they wanted it to look like someone who'd written in. So I got the job because I looked third generation Italian, if you can figure that out. And that was my first job. And I got my SAG card then too. After the commercial, in Central Florida, commercials are big business, especially during the winter time, because it's snowing everywhere else. So they come down to Florida and do a lot of national and local commercials. But when Disney built sound stages, as Universal did as well, they started doing a lot of movies. So that's how I got work on Passenger 57 and worked on the Hulk Hogan series Thunder in Paradise. Had a small part in that. And still commercials. I did commercials for Walmart, for Toyota, for Bennigan's, for Thompson's Water Seal, for Amtrak, for Universal. So that was how I was able to make a living, because I was a single mom as well for 10 years. I had been acting since about 1992, and I moved here in 2000. I started acting professionally in 92, and then I moved here in the year 2000, took some time off to raise 4 children, and then got back into it. No, I was doing 4 shows a year, and I was carrying the maximum hours that I could for courses, because I changed from music performance to speech. So I was maxed out, and I only had jobs during my breaks from school, and I worked as a bartender and cocktail waitress. My professional acting didn't start right out of college. Right after I graduated, I got married 3 months after graduation to an Air Force fighter pilot. So I was married for 7 years. So that was 83 to 90. Okay. And in that time, I just did some community theater and had 2 children. So I focused on being an Air Force wife and doing the odd thing because I enjoyed it, but it was just community theater. After I became separated, I moved to Orlando because I thought it would be safer to move as a single mother with 2 children than to move to Los Angeles, because I still had my degree and I thought I could use that to support myself. And I lucked out. I really, truly lucked out because I hadn't been there very long when I got an agent and got called for a national commercial for a product called Thompson's Water Seal. And they were calling in girls that supposedly looked third generation Italian, which I guess they thought I did. And I went in and I booked the job, which was great because I made amazingly good money. And I got to join the Screen Actors Guild Union then on my first gig. Well, I had an agent, and then I went right up in the agents because that was a nice big national. So it was airing all over the US. So from that one commercial, I was going to the mailbox and getting my residual checks every week, which was just like Christmas every week. And I thought, this is so easy. And my girlfriend, she said, you have no idea how hard it is. People have been doing this for years and years. So I lucked out, really, I did. And so I made a living making commercials and doing print work. So I did a lot of print work for Universal and for Disney and for Tupperware and different products. So that allowed me to be mostly a stay-at-home mom, which was really important for me because I was mom and dad for 10 years. All right, so I was already separated and then divorced and was making a living. And then the bottom fell out of the Florida market, and I had to teach myself the computer and join a temp agency, which was not nearly as fun as doing what I was doing. And I wasn't making nearly the money that I had been making. So I did whatever I could to make a living. So I stuffed envelopes, and I worked in trade shows, and I cleaned people's houses, and I mowed people's yards, and you name it, I did it to try and make a living. And I went to a wedding. A friend was getting married, and there was this amazing man who was there from Dublin, Ireland. And they wanted me to chat with him. And I thought, they said he's a microbiologist and a professor, and he works with the United Nations. And I thought, what am I going to talk to him about? Because it's not like acting at all. But I had an interest in science. I did pretty well in chemistry. So I started asking him science questions. And he was just unlike anybody I had ever met. And he was a little nerdy, and I can be a little nerdy. And so we just enjoyed talking about science and world events. And we dated for 7 years, long distance. I lived in Florida and he lived in Ireland, and we wrote letters and made phone calls and would see each other once or twice a year. And then I decided this just isn't going to work. We were too far away. So I said, let's be friends. And so I dated people and he worked. And after about 2 years, I found that I was comparing everybody to him, and nobody seemed to match up to him. And we're still friends and still in contact. So he called me one night and I said, I did this. I said, do you remember a couple of years ago you mentioned maybe us getting married? He said, yeah. I said, well, is the offer still on the table? And he said, Lesa, from the day I met you, I've always thought of you as my wife. So I said, well, then let's do it. I'll move to you. So because it was easier for me to move. So I took the kids out of school, sold the house, packed up, and moved to Dublin, Ireland to marry an Irishman with 2 kids. Acting was still in my mind because it's really the only thing I want to do. I have done loads of other jobs and I kept going back to it. So it's a really nice portable job that you can bring, especially if you're moving to another English-speaking country. The difference of living in Florida to Ireland is huge. Nobody could ever understand why I wanted to move to Ireland when they found out I came from Florida. They'd say, why did you move here? So, well, of course, there was a man involved. So I got married and they said, why didn't you get him to move there? I said, to tell you the truth, I'm sick of Florida weather. And there's no bad weather in Ireland. It's just if you're wearing the wrong clothes. So I bought loads of rain gear and layers. You have to dress in layers to stay warm and take off because you can get 3 seasons in a day. The only thing that bothered me at first about living here was in the wintertime because it was so dark. And I was used to it being a much more closer to the equator, so there wasn't as big of a difference. Loved summer because it was light all the time, but then it was dark all the time in the winter. So got kind of depressed at first so then I just realized I needed to keep really busy. So even though I'd stepped back from acting because I was now raising 4 children and trying to meld families and learn school ways and classes and cooking differently, I started back into acting, I guess in 2003. And I started out with a radio show because a friend of mine said, there's this radio station called Anne Olivia and you have a good voice. So why don't you see if you can come up with a radio show? So I developed a half-hour segment called American Links. And it was America and its links with Ireland. So it'd be like if you and I were sitting in a restaurant having a cup of coffee and talking about different subjects. So I'd met a lot of really interesting people there. And it kind of got my confidence back up. And then I started thinking about getting into acting. So I was able to do theater again. So I joined, I got plays through a group called Classic Stage Ireland. So I was doing Shakespeare and Greek tragedy. And I loved theater. I hadn't done it for so long, but I love both theater and film and television because they're completely different mediums. But in theater, it's the same show every night, but it's a different show every night. And you have a chance, you get all these do-overs each night in the run. But in film, you only have to get it right once and it's immortalized. And sometimes it takes a while to get to that one perfect shot. But it's different. It's like you just think things in your heart and they show on your face. Whereas in theater, you have to be able to be seen and heard to the little old lady who's hard of hearing in the back row. So that's kind of how I can explain the difference between the two. Yes, and I found an agent. I was lucky who wanted an American on her books. And she was a local agent here in Ireland and started doing some of the plays. And then, by a total fluke, my daughter had a friend whose brother-in-law worked in a sound studio. And he had come over to the house for dinner. And he said that he was working for a company called Intuition to do educational and informational software. And they had an American female voice over artist. And for whatever reason, she was either leaving the country or quit or whatever. And he was really stuck for finding somebody. He says, I have no idea where I'm going to find somebody. And Nikki's friend Anna said, I know somebody. And she's like, 14, 15. And he said, what do you mean? And she said, yeah, my friend Nikki's mom. She's an actor. So this guy named Kieran calls me and asks if I would be interested in doing some voiceover. And I said, yes, I would. And I've been working with Intuition ever since. I got into film. I did some auditions, but didn't really book much. And that was okay because I was busy doing plays. But when I seriously wanted to get into film, I decided that I needed specific film training. Even though I had done some film in the US, I did the Passenger 57, I did Thunder in Paradise, I had done different television commercials, but I kind of felt like I was fooling people and I really needed to be educated for film. So they were opening, Ireland was opening a film school called the Program at the Factory in Dublin. And I was in the first class of that. And I had access to, I think being in the first year, they pulled out all the stops. And I got to do workshops with Jim Sheridan and got to work with so many directors. And John Carney was one of the directors who was on the board. Christian Sheridan was my mentor. It was Lance Daly worked with us as well, Shimmy Marcus. And they were all professionals in their field. So we really kind of got the best of the best. And they'd bring in these amazing artists to talk with us. You know, Richard E. Grant and Fiona Shaw and Aidan Gillen and Saoirse Ronan. And I can't even remember them all. It was just like the best time ever. And I learned a lot. And that also gave me confidence. So a lot of people came to see our showcase, and then I started getting calls for work. And so I started doing film and a little bit of television here because I did not have an Irish accent. And that was fine for me because I figured there's plenty of people here that could do it. So, but I wasn't as marketable. So since then, I've learned to do a couple for voiceover, which is fun. I enjoy that. But I still primarily do different American accents. My most memorable film role, I would say, was working with Jim Sheridan in The Secret Scripture. Because it's Jim Sheridan, and he was there workshopping this script. And to work with him on a workshop basis for 5 days was amazing. I mean, you'd pay a fortune for that, and it was just free. And I ended up getting cast as a character. And I did have an accent there because I worked with the amazing Brendan Gunn, who is a dialect coach here. He lives in Belfast, but he works all over the world. And he helped me develop a 1950s Sligo working class accent. And it was brilliant fun. It was hard work and it was scary and it was so exciting and I learned so much. And the DP was amazing, and Joan Bergen was doing costumes, and she just looks at you and you get a costume waiting for you and it fits like a glove. I mean, these are the pros. And it was the scariest and most exciting time of my career. Voiceover is a third real treat of a way for an actor to work. Voiceover can be educational, it can be informational, you can be doing dubbing for films. Say the sound wasn't right on the set, you'd have to go to a sound stage and re-record what is being said, or sometimes you're doing it for a different character, or if you're dubbing in a different language. So those are great fun. Or if you're doing an animated film, I've had the pleasure of doing one of those, and that was great. And it was a bit surreal because I'm in the sound stage and the director was on Skype in a different country and the producers were on Skype on another computer screen in another different country at the same time, all watching me in the booth, pretending I was outside and climbing mountains and doing all these other things, fighting. I did an audiobook, and I have the biggest respect for readers of audiobooks because they make it sound so easy, and it is not. There's so much work involved and so much prep involved, and people can make a living out of that, but you have got to be really good and consistent, and It's all about pacing, and whether you're a narrator or you're the narrator or you're all the characters or all combined. It's very diverse. I have not done video games yet, but I'm looking forward to sticking my hat in the ring for some animation.